So the first thing you're going to need, of course, is your hair of choice. I do have 4 bundles of 22-inch Brazilian body wave from March Queen hair. The hair did come ombre like this. I did wash the hair already because it is human hair. I always wash it when I first receive it, and then I condition it and just let the hair air dry. I also have a 22-inch body wave closure as well, and the link to March Queen hair will be down below in the description box if you guys are interested in checking out their website. It is easier for me to keep all of my materials in arm's reach as I'm making the wig. I do have some scissors, some hair clips, a thing of thread. I got this thread from the beauty supply store. I have a comb, some pins to pin down the cap so that it doesn't move, and then a needle of choice. Some people prefer a straight needle, some people prefer a curved needle. I like to have curved needles. It's easier for me to grip them because I do have long nails. Now, when I first started making wigs, I did use a styrofoam head. I did have a lot of mistakes using a styrofoam head because sometimes the cap would be too small or the cap would be too big. It just never worked out. So I did invest in a canvas head. My head circumference is about 22 inches, so I did get a 23-inch. This is the cap of choice that I like to use. It's a regular dome cap. I do use my pins to pin it down before I start sewing so that the cap does not move, and that way I know that it will fit comfortably on my head. So this is how I make sure my cap and the wig is nice and comfortable. I also like to thread about 5 to 6 needles before I start as well. You don't have to do this, but I just find it to be easier. So this is just something that I always do before I start. Starting with your closure, it's very important that you take the time to line up the hairline of the closure with the cap. You can bring it forward a little if you would like, but you want to make sure it's very close to it so that when you get to the end and it's time to cut the cap underneath, it lines up properly with the rest of the cap and it sits on your head the right way. So make sure you pin it down and make sure it is lined up correctly so that you don't have any issues when you get to the end. Once you have that secure, go ahead and take the back of it and stick a pin in the middle of the closure, and now you're ready to start sewing your wig. Now when you start sewing your hair onto the cap, you want to always make sure you go through the first layer of the cap only. You don't want to go all the way through the cap because that will tighten the cap, tighten. That will tighten the cap up, and you don't want that. Now you do see I don't start right at the beginning. I like to start about an inch ways back, and then I sew forward, and this is just for personal reasons because I don't like for the knot of the thread to be right at the hairline. So again, I just start about an inch ways back, and then I sew forward, and then I just sew back until I'm done and ready to sew on the rest of the closure. So again, in case I confused you, I started about an inch ways back. Now I am at the front, which is this is where you would start if you would like, but again, I don't like for the knot on the thread to be right here. So now since I'm at the front of the hairline, I'm just going to sew all the way back. I do double the thread maybe once or twice every time I sew, and I just continue to go back. Again, you're only going to go through that first layer of the cap, the first layer only. When sewing the closure on, I would recommend doing it in sections. So I like to sew on the left side first with one separate needle. Then I go and get another needle and sew on the right side. And then I'll sew on the back. And to me, this just helps the closure lay flat as possible. So I don't, again, recommend sewing it continuously all the way around. Just take your time and sew them in 3 different sections so that it lays flat. When it comes to laying the tracks, you can flip them over, you can double them, or you can cut them. I prefer to cut them because I haven't mastered how to get the tracks to lay really flat without cutting them. So I always cut my tracks. And again, this is something that you just have to decide what you want to do. Some people don't like to cut them because you do get a little bit more shedding. I do have 4 bundles of hair, as you saw. So to me, the shedding, unless it's some really horrible hair, the little shedding that I'm going to get from cutting the tracks is not going to really make a big difference because I have so much hair. So I pin the track onto the cap and then I start to sew. When I first get the needle, I like to sew straight through the track. So I sew through the track first and then I sew around the track because it's faster and it's easier. Once I get to the other end, I like to put the needle directly through the track, and that is how I like to close off that track. So I always sew through the track only when I'm starting or when I'm ending it, and then I go around the track when I'm sewing it throughout the middle. Once I get to the top, I just take the tracks and I just sew them straight across, straight across, straight across, straight across, all the way until I get to the top. I used to connect the closure with that last track, but I stopped doing that because it does buckle a little. As long as your tracks are close to one another and you sew really closely, try not to alter the shape of the wig, like try not to, the wig cap, try not to take your needle through the stitching of the cap, because that will alter the shape of the cap and it probably will be too tight if you do that. You don't want to mess with those threads. You see where my hand is, where the cap is like stitched together? You don't want to pull your needle through there, but just make sure you stitch really closely when you are stitching, especially at the top, and that's pretty much all you have to do. So again, just to recap, I always start by sewing directly through the track. That is how I begin the stitching of the track. Once I get the needle through the track, I go around the track because it's faster and easier for me. And then once I get to the end again, I go through the track. I do this all the way throughout the entire wig, making sure that my tracks are spaced accordingly, according to how much hair I have. When you're done, you just take your cap and carefully cut off the part that is under the lace. So make sure you don't cut any of the stitching that you stitched to the cap, but you want to cut directly next to it so that your lace will be able to show. Last but not least, you want to make sure you cut off the lace in the front of your wig. I did cut mine off camera. I also added some finishing powder that is close to my skin tone, and this was my final look. So I hope that this video was helpful for you guys. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them down below for me. Again, if you're interested in this hair company, I will have their link down below for you in the description box, and I will talk to you later on my next video. Bye.